The following episode contains strong language and descriptions of violence. Please take care when listening.
But it's like I said, bro, nobody wants to do.
This is about as bad as it can get in an undercover operation. Scott, as in FBI Special Agent Scott Payne, is being strip searched for a wire. He's in the clubhouse basement of one of the most dangerous motorcycle gangs in America, the Outlaws. His cover team is parked outside in a surveillance vehicle, listening.
And we just sat there and we waited, and we didn't know. We kind of just listened to hear what we were going to hear and then make a decision. If there was any violence, obviously, we would have to put an end to it.
Could you still hear clothesline?
Oh, yeah, we heard everything. Yeah, everything.
That's Sergeant Thomas Higginbotham, or Higgy. He knows what the Outlaws are capable of, especially Clothesline, the group's enforcer, the one who's doing the search.
Gotta do what I gotta do. And like I said, I've only known you a year and a half, so I gotta have my doubts myself. I'm not fucking gonna lie to you. In the back of my head, I got my doubts myself. I don't know you that well.
Scott is trying to seem nonchalant. On the outside, it looks like he's holding it together.
You know where I'm coming from, right?
That's cool, dude. That's cool.
But what's going on in his head is a different story.
Hey, is this it? Am I going to die right now? Am I just getting ready to take an ass whipping? I don't know what's going to happen. Are they going to find it? If they find it, I mean, what's going to happen?
Good luck. I'm reaching in and find a knife with my fucking hand up. Right? Picture's my old lady.
He did ask me, hey, am I going to find anything like some naked pictures of my old lady, right? And he's like laughing because I'm supposed to be his buddy. He's like, and I'm like,
Clothesline runs his hands all over Scott's clothes. The seconds go by slowly.
But then I pass. And he hands me everything. So we go right back into business. And then I'll make a joke.
I just thought I was going to fucking walk in this. If I'd have saw plastic on the floor, I'd have been like, I'm going.
What don't say myself?
Yeah, I've been like, I'll see y'all motherfuckers later. It's been fun.
So I'm having that adrenaline dump. Now my hamstrings are starting to come back under me. But I'm a talker. And I'm talking nervously.
Are we good? Can I fucking pull my underwear out my ass?
Yeah, we're good.
God dang.
When I mention this undercover video to Higgy, he reveals something that shocks me.
Michelle, I've never watched it.
What? Really?
I never watched it. What I heard, and I said, that's all I need to know. What else do I need to know? I didn't want to watch it.
There's no curiosity?
No, I was sitting there, I heard it, and I know it happened, and I didn't need to hear anymore. It was sickening. It was scary.
After what feels like forever, Scott emerges from the cellar. His heart's racing and ringing in his ears, and he heads straight to the bar to calm his nerves.
And now I'm like, yeah, give me another Jack and Coke. Yeah, give me another Jack and Coke. Cause I'm and they're not even touching me because my adrenaline's so jacked up. Like, give me another one. But then Big Scotty shows up, which he knew they were going to take me in the basement too.
Just a reminder about the many Scotts. Big Scotty, also known as Scotty T, is Scott Town. He's an associate of the Outlaws and someone who Undercover Scott genuinely considers a close friend.
But me, Scott, and Joe Dogs go out to a bar, and essentially I get pissed.
And you mean pissed as in not drunk, like pissed off?
Yeah, pissed off. I remember sitting there going, hey, you know what? I tell you what, you guys show up tomorrow, when we meet in the parking lot, I'm going to strip all you sons of bitches. How's that? Cold as hell outside. You're going to all be naked in the damn parking lot. Tex, you need to calm down, man. Hey, man, this happens. And I'll tell you, as the case went on, we found out they've taken women down there and put blades against their throat to find out if they're a source. That's the cellar. That's what they do down there.
Scott finishes blowing off steam, and they all agree on a meeting spot for the next morning. As soon as he gets back to his hotel room, he makes a phone call.
He would always get me a burner phone whenever he was on any undercover.
To his wife.
And so I would have a phone laying in my bed on my pillow. And when he was done for the night, he would call me. And most of the time it was just like, hey, babe, I'm good. I'll talk to you tomorrow. And I say, okay, love you. Good night. And that was all. That was all I needed.
For safety reasons, we've decided not to use her real name. Instead, we'll call her Kara. Kara and Scott have been together for more than 2 decades, and Operation Roadkill began just a few years after they started their family.
Normally, our conversation was very short and sweet because it was usually at like 4 a.m. or something. But that particular night, I was like, are you good, honey?
And I said, yeah, why?
Because at one point today, I just pulled over on the road and just was praying for you.
She said, I got this overwhelming feeling of like fear. And I just started praying for you. And Michelle, I matched it up. I'm not making it up. I matched it up. That's when I was in the basement being stripped at gunpoint.
The exact time.
Yeah, exact time. Yeah.
But that terrifying moment was only the beginning. This case would soon push everything to the limit. His marriage, his body, and his mind. I'm Michelle Shephard, and from CBC, this is Agent Palehorse. Episode 4, Do Not Recommend.
I think I just was blissfully unaware of how big the cases were that he was working on. I mean, I was new to everything. I didn't know much, this girl from small town, middle America. I had never even left my state for, most of my life. So meeting him and moving to the places we were, the big cities and the border of Mexico and all the places we've been and all the things he's done. I mean, it's been quite a ride.
As they say, opposites attract. And that's true for Scott and his wife. Scott doesn't mind the limelight. Kara, she's more of a behind-the-scenes person.
I love my role as a wife. I love my role as a mother. If I could just write my life the way I wanted it, my life was how I would have written it. So as far as that goes, I love being the supporting person in the relationship.
They met through mutual friends back in the 90s before Scott joined the FBI. He was working in the Vice and Narcotics Unit in South Carolina at the time. And after years of dating long distance, they tied the knot in 2001.
I mean, immediately when we got married, he started his undercovers. And I remember telling him one morning, I'm like, maybe you could go back to landscaping. and he's like, what are you talking about? And I said, well, I don't like saying goodbye to you in the morning and not knowing if you're going to come home that night. And he said, honey, I could be mowing the lawn and get struck by lightning. If it's my day to go, it's my day to go. We're believers. That's what we believe.
Their faith bonded them from the beginning, and Kara says it was her faith that helped her with the stress of his undercover work. That and a film starring Johnny Depp and Al Pacino.
Here's what I tell people when they ask me, like, how did you cope with, living with an undercover and how did you deal with it? And I said, well, I did get some training through the movie of Donnie Brasco. That was my training.
If you've seen this film, this isn't exactly comforting. Donnie Brasco is based on the real-life story of Joe Pistone, an FBI agent who went undercover for 6 years to infiltrate one of the biggest mafia families in New York City. It was a tough gig and very hard on his marriage. Brasco's wife is played in the movie by Anne Hesh.
He leaves me with the house and the kids and the bills, but not a husband. I want my husband.
Even though Scott and Kara would talk every day when he was undercover, she couldn't help but worry about him.
He would leave for about 2 weeks. Days were fine, but around about 9 p.m., I would start. It would just start in my chest, and I would kind of know what he was probably getting ready to start doing that evening. And so I would just rearrange furniture, and I'd make my whole house look different, and then I'd go to bed and sleep peacefully.
Despite what you see in the movies, being an undercover agent is rarely a full-time gig. They usually have to juggle multiple roles and cases at the same time. And on top of that, Scott was also an instructor.
A typical month might go like this. This full weekend, 3-day, 4-day weekend, I'm undercover in Oklahoma. I come home, I'm putting together all that stuff, typing it up. Then I go and I'll be a case agent. And then I take off to Massachusetts and I'm undercover for the Outlaws. I come back, and because I'm anal and try to be a professional, I would go through all the recordings and end up typing these long reports with accurate verbatim statements in them that were pertinent to the case. And then maybe the last week I find out that the training coordinator for the division has set up that whole week we're doing firearms and tactical training. So, and then in between all that, we as a SWAT team might get called out 2 or 3 times.
It was a tough time. He did the work of not 2 people, but 3 or possibly 10. I don't know anyone else who could sustain that kind of workload and that period of time and still stay focused and clear and know what your goal is and successfully carry it out.
So I would come home just beat, and I'm like, oh, I'm so happy to see my family and, get caught up on what I missed and how things are going. But I was just beat. And I wanted a home cooked meal. I was tired of going through drive-thrus. I was tired of eating out. And to me, at that point, hamburger helper would have been a home cooked meal. And I would come home sometimes and it may be like a Thursday night or something, or a Friday. And I would get there and my wife, she'd say, "Guess what, honey?" And I'd go, "What?" She goes, "I got a babysitter so we can go out tonight." And I'd go, "Oh, damn it." My liver's going, "No." And I'm like, "Oh, man, let's go have some drinks. I've missed you. Let's have some quality time." And I'm like, "Oh," but I cowboy up and try to make it,
The nights Scott was home, he'd also try to spend as much time as possible with his daughters.
At the end of the day, I would most likely pour myself a Jack and Coke. And then I would go into my oldest daughter's room first. And then I would rock her to sleep. But as I'm rocking her, I would always hum an Elvis song. Why? I have no idea. But it was one of 2 songs. I would either always hum "Are You Lonesome Tonight" by Elvis or the American Trilogy by Elvis. And I would hum those until she fell asleep. And then I would go into my youngest daughter's room. And sometimes I would do this thing on them where I would just kind of like, just not a massage, but like, you just rub your finger very lightly across the eyebrow and across the forehead and then down their face. And I would count it. It'd be like 1, 2, and I'd go through their hair and over their ears and maybe tickle the lip and come back up. So that was the trick. But my youngest daughter I'd think she was asleep and she'd tap me and she'd go, "Daddy, do the twick, do the twick." Because she's still learning how to speak.
Scott continued to balance life at home and with the Outlaws, and his friendship with the targets continued to deepen, especially with Big Scotty.
And it does get harder the deeper you go and the longer you are, because, he's got kids that are the same age as my kids. And instead of being at home with my youngest daughter, rocking her to sleep or doing the twick, she's there without me, and I'm holding his daughter, and I'm bouncing her on my lap.
He would come home with stories. And so he would talk about these guys, especially one in particular, that he literally was best friends through and through with this guy, other than just the one little detail of he wasn't being completely honest about who he was. But other than that, he was who he is, and he, other than his name, he was him.
Big Scotty was respected by the Outlaws. He'd often bring Scott to gatherings and vouch for him.
And, I'm walking in, and of course, everybody's like, he's like, hey, what's going on, brother? Everybody's like, hey, he's Big T, he's Big Scotty, hey, what's going on? And they're doing this, they'd turn to me, and I'd go, yeah, they go, who are you? And I go, I'm just his bitch. I'm just following him today, Nothing to look at here, That's me. I did like the self-deprecating humor, the Tommy Boy, Chris Farley type stuff. And, we go in there and you start meeting more people and hanging out, building trust, getting to know people.
The two became inseparable. And as the investigation went on, Scott couldn't help but think about what loomed around the corner.
You sit there and you go, man, this dude's got 4 daughters. He said he almost went to jail, 25 to life one time. He paid a bunch of money to get out of it. And I'm like, why are you doing this? Why do you want to be a part of this big deal? I mean, in other words, I'm not forcing you.
The big deal. That's the protection detail that Scott and his team had set up, where the Outlaws would guard a supposed transport of drugs moving from Mexico to Canada. It was going to be the biggest sting to date, which explains why the Outlaws were so nervous and why Scott ended up strip searched in the cellar.
Now, did I sleep that night? Shit, man, maybe an hour. There's so much emotion and adrenaline going through you, it's just like I barely slept. And then I get up the next day, and I'm hoping they show up. I'm hoping I pass the test. Are we doing this? Are we not doing it? And they all show up.
That morning, Scott meets the Outlaws outside a diner.
And I go, okay, so here's how it's going to go down. We're going to go to the Westgate Mall. And immediately, the hem-hawing starts, and Chocolate Scott's like, oh, man, that's like 2 minutes from my house. I could have slept another hour. And then Joe Dogs, he says, I swear to God, you guys are the laziest bunch of criminals I've ever met in my entire life.
Once they stop complaining, Scott gets them back on track. So, this was the plan. The semi-trailers would be parked rear to rear. They raise the doors and start moving the drug shipment as quickly as possible. And remember, while the drivers were undercover FBI agents, posing as the Mexican cartel and the Canadian buyers, the drugs are real. The Outlaws would be responsible for surveillance and security.
The plan was if cops are seen or anything suspicious is heard, doors go down, trucks pull apart from each other, we sit and wait. There's a hotel by the Westgate Mall, and there's only 3 entrances, 3 ways in and out to get to that hotel. So it made it easy. 3 choke points to watch.
They head over to a parking lot across the street from the mall and take their places.
We were sitting there on surveillance, and I remember Chocolate Scott calls out, and he's like, hey, he basically uses he's cop verbiage. Mm-hmm. He's like, hey, you got one coming to you, tinted, occupied 2 times. And I was like, I turned to Scott Town, and I'm like, what the hell did he just say? And he's like, what? I go, occupied 2 times? I said, that bitch been watching too many cop shows. When you're becoming an undercover, you got to let the cop shit go. You can't be talking like a cop.
Exactly.
I know,
so you must have had a moment where you're like, oh, Chocolate Scott might be undercover as well.
Yeah, I know. I'm like, hey, they were better on surveillance than a lot of people I've trained.
2 teams of undercover agents pull into the parking lot. After some quick hellos, they get down to business.
Joe Dogs insisted on being on the truck. I want to be in there. I'm like, okay, all right. So you got asthma. I don't know how much you can pick up and move shit, but...
With Joe Dog's help, the drivers move the packages from one truck to another. And in just a matter of minutes, it's done. The doors close, the trucks pull apart, and take off in opposite directions.
And again, this is like 2006-ish, 7-ish. So weed was not near as legal as it is now. And boy, it reeked too. You could smell it when the truck would drive by.
It went exactly as planned. The drugs never left FBI custody, no one got hurt, and after months of patiently building the case, prosecutors could start drawing up arrest warrants. As far as the Outlaws were concerned, 40 kilos of cocaine and 1,000 pounds of weed were headed to the Canadian border, all thanks to their top-notch surveillance. This was a huge win for Agent Payne, the undercover, and Tex, the semi-legitimate businessman. But Scott the family man was needed at home.
That Thursday night, I sleep maybe a couple of hours. And then Friday, I get up and I'm back on, I get on a flight to fly home to McAllen. I drive, that's probably like 15, 20 minutes to the house, walk straight in, brush my teeth, change my shirt, and my wife and my daughters and my mother-in-law are ready.
He loads everyone into the truck, and off they go to the big annual Rio Grande Valley Christmas party for FBI agents and their families.
So I show up and I'm Santa Claus. Here I am literally a couple of days earlier, naked in the basement at gunpoint. And, ho effing ho, right?
He had very long days, very long nights, a lot of lack of sleep, a ton of drinking while he was there, which we all know just complicates things. But he just functioned through it all. I definitely remember how exhausted he was. And, as a wife, you're like, what can I do to help you? And there's nothing I can do.
Then came a day that Kara refers to as a wake-up call.
He was at work and I was at home and one of our kids was sick and I was just trying to decide to take her to the doctor. Just such a simple thing. And so I called him and, I kind of called him for everything.
Well, we would get in these arguments because my wife hated going to the doctor because as a protective mother, she's like, it's a virus. I'm going to take our kid. We're going to sit in a waiting room for 3+ hours or more with a bunch of sick kids, exposing our kids to more. And after a whole day, they're going to go, oh, it's just a virus. But my point was, we'll go make sure they're taking the money out of my damn check anyway. We got a health plan, go. So that conversation had happened more than once.
But he was in the middle of an interview and I didn't know that. He took the call.
I was with another agent interviewing somebody on something pretty serious, and it was a pretty break. I can't remember the case, but it was a good interview, and we were getting what we needed. This is where I'm working the magic, And I answered the phone, and I said, "Have you taken her to the doctor?" And she said, "No." And I gave a sigh, an exhale, like a. Now, I'm doing that because I'm looking at the person across from me and thinking, I'm going to have to cut this interview. What she hears is, I'm extremely pissed off, and here we go again. And I don't know if there was yelling, but she hung up. So I'm like, okay, well, let's finish this interview, and I'm going home.
And so I was super upset, but I just didn't go to the doctor, and I was rocking our daughter in her room, and he comes in the house. And it's the middle of the day, so I'm like, what? And he came in the bedroom and she was asleep. And I was like, nothing like this had ever happened before, but he really lost his temper with me.
Sometimes I don't realize that I'm talking with a super deep, stern voice and that my eyebrows are cocked and I don't realize that. And I'm not as mad as you think I am, or I may not be mad at all. But either way, we hit that spiral and it just kept getting worse and worse. And I remember I would never lay my hands on her or do anything like that, but I kicked an ottoman. It was on the floor and I was like, I can't, bam, I kicked the ottoman. It flies across the room, hits the drywall and punches a big ass hole in it. And I'm like, damn, I'm gonna have to fix that. That's what I'm thinking. And she gets up, goes into the bathroom and shuts the door and locks it with our girl.
I kept telling him to leave, get out. And he wouldn't. He kept persisting and persisting. And I was like, if you don't leave, I'm going to make 2 phone calls. One is to the cops and the next one's to the divorce lawyer. I'm like, just get out of my house.
She said, I called 911. She goes, but I hung up. And I said, it doesn't matter. I'm a damn cop. You call 911 in the United States and you hang up, they're going to try to call you back. If you don't answer, somebody's coming. A uniformed cop's coming. So I called my boss, and he said, I'm just eating lunch. I said, well, you might want to wrap it up and get over to my house, because McAllen PD's on their way, I'm pretty sure.
His boss ended up coming, and the police came, and the first thing they asked me, is he armed? And I said, yes. And so it was kind of a big thing. You know, they were very thorough in making sure everything was okay, and just to make sure I was okay.
No reports were filed or anything like that, but Safeguard was notified, and they said you can't go back on an undercover until you come here to get assessed. Just like the basement.
Safeguard is a unit in the FBI that monitors the well-being of its employees. It was created in the 80s to help undercover agents cope with the pressures of the job or the aftermath of a traumatic event. Must have been hard, though, when you realized how scared she was of you in that moment. Like, I appreciate what you're saying, that you don't know what your face is doing, don't always take in impact, your size, but there is such a gender and physical divide there. And to know, like, she took your daughter into the bathroom, it must have been...
Yeah, well, it would break my heart if I thought she was that scared of me.
I've never been afraid of my husband. And that day I was afraid. I mean, I locked myself in the bathroom. And I think he let exhaustion and anger just kind of take over, because it certainly wasn't about whether I was going to take our daughter to the doctor. That's not what that was about. And when he came in the bedroom, and he literally was like bowed up, and he was mad. And I've never, ever, that's never happened before.
Safeguard brings Scott in for a detailed assessment. There's a long written test, then 2 conversations, one with a psychologist and the other with a counselor, who's usually a fellow undercover.
One of the tests was, or one of the assessments is open-ended sentences. So it's literally like, men are, you complete the sentence. Women are, you complete it. My mother is, my father is, my badge and my gun are. And one of them was, the last time I relaxed, and I literally went blank. I had nothing. Like, I couldn't think of anything that I did that was relaxing. And I'm sitting here going, I go, well, working out. And I go, nah, working out is a way of life. I mean, does it release endorphins? Does it make me feel better? Yeah, but I'm not working out to Yanni. I'm not in some namaste, I'm like, I'm throwing iron around and screaming and punching bags and,
Scott still passes the test, and the Safeguard team clears him to go back to work.
I was worried about him. I was worried about his emotional state. Really, he's married, he had kids, he's with these guys. You can see
Higgy was watching and listening to Scott more than anyone, and he worried about Scott's psyche after spending so many days and nights with violent criminals.
He could easily get hurt. He could harm his marriage. There's a lot of things that could go wrong. And he's drinking.
Yeah.
And he's on motorcycles. He's in cars. All the things that happen to civilians could happen to him.
Right.
And that's his job. That's his career. And after a while, you see his personality. It changes. It changes. And I've seen it with undercovers before.
But the case continued. And next up, Daytona Bike Week. That's a motorcycle rally held every year in Daytona Beach, Florida. Even though the event is meant for all bike enthusiasts, members of the major motorcycle gangs never fail to show up. And they don't leave their rivalries at home.
We're just going where the case will take you. I'm getting introduced to more people. I'm getting introduced to higher ranking people. I'm getting more exposure. So you might get new targets.
The problem is he's at a national run for the Outlaws. We don't know who they bring to their parties and their meetings and the people he's going to see. He could have easily bumped into someone he had arrested as a local cop or whatever, or an FBI agent. He knows he's around dangerous people. He's there.
Scott makes his way to Florida with another undercover agent who we'll call Tony. The whole week, he's rubbing shoulders with outlaw members from around the world, including one very senior outlaw who investigators had been watching closely. everyone called him Hillbilly. Hillbilly, he took a liking to Scott and started talking pretty freely around him. This got the FBI team in Florida excited, so much so that an agent asked if Scott would work undercover there as well.
He said, how about we get together, we put it all on a big table. Boston, don't take your case down yet. Scott, you come to Florida and patch under Hillbilly.
Getting patched as a full-fledged outlaw is a big deal for an undercover. A notch in your belt, like you were that good convincing them you're legit that they let you into the inner circle. The Taunton chapter, which he infiltrated, had wanted Scott to patch over, but Higgy and the rest of the team in Massachusetts were opposed to it from the beginning.
So they bring him in. That means he has to be a probationary outlaw. He has to start like everybody else. So he has to basically be that guy. He may be required to commit a violent act or commit a felony to get that patch. So they put him in that position. Then they start showing up at his house or his apartment. You know what I mean? So now you look at like Scott, like with the Outlaws. He was with them, riding with them, so he'd ride at the back of the pack. But when the Angels, other rival gangs, attack bikers, they have in Massachusetts, I'm sure they do in other states, they go to the back of the pack, they run them over, and they shoot them. That's what they do. So now we're going to have this big guy, 6'4", 6'5". He's a perfect target for a rival gang. So I'm not comfortable with that. And why would I be?
But it's kind of like the bragging rights, right? That you get patched shows that you were in deep and they really believed you. And so as an undercover, that's...
Yes, it's the ultimate. It's the ultimate in your face.
Right.
I got your colors. I'm wearing your colors. I infiltrated you, your club. That's the victory.
The case team was close to wrapping up Operation Roadkill, but Scott now had the chance to help take down even bigger targets within the Outlaws. Sure, he was tired, and patching over would stretch the case longer than expected. It would mean more late nights, drive-through meals, and long flights across the country. But the prospect still excited Scott.
I said, hell yeah. Now let's patch. I'm like, yeah, man, let's go. Let's go. I had been infatuated with I was a biker. I am a biker. I mean, that was my goal. I mean, that was like a kid in a candy store, you know? You let me run free, a kid run free in Toys R Us, get anything you want, you know? But what I didn't realize is that I was already shutting down. I wake up one of those mornings and, you can still hear the eggs and whiskey sloshing in your belly. I'm feeling fat and out of shape. I'm like, I'm going to go ahead and get some kind of a workout in. In the hotel room, man, I'm doing mountain climbers. I'm doing push-ups. I'm doing body squats. I'm doing burpees. And then I come up for air and there's not any. And I'm going, my belly's all bloated. I'm like, what the hell's going on? And I forgot all about combat breathing. I forgot all about breathing in a paper bag to regulate your oxygen versus carbon dioxide, and my hair follicles are tingling, shaking, and, I'm pouring sweat. Every pore in my body is opening. And I had a panic attack.
Then Scott hears a knock.
And I open the door, and I got a towel wrapped around me, but I'm as white as the towel, and my lips are all pursed.
It's Tony, the other undercover who rode with him to Daytona.
And he looks at me, and with his Hispanic accent, he goes, "Are you okay, my friend?" And I'm like, "I don't think so." So he comes in. I know I laugh about it now, but I was scared, right? He comes in.
They walk outside to Scott's balcony overlooking the hotel pool and the Atlantic Ocean.
And we're talking, and he's like, he's been around a long time, and was very wise to things that can happen to undercovers. And he starts going through a litany of things. It's this list. He's like, well, sometimes we get stressed because we don't know when the case is going to end. And I'm like, okay. So sometimes we get stressed because we know the case is going to end, and they're getting ready to find out that you've been lying to them this whole time. Oh, okay. Sometimes, and he starts saying all this shit. And he looks over and he goes, "Is it any of that?" And I said, "Well, it is now, damn it." I said, I wouldn't even, I said, none of that was in my head, but now it is. Yeah, it's all of that.
But Scott didn't have time to think about these things. They were still in Daytona in the thick of Bike Week.
Did I stop? Did I say, man, something's not right. I need to go home. We need to stop this operation. No. I took an hour nap. I got up feeling shell-shocked, and I'm like, okay, let's go back out.
He finally flies back home to Texas after partying with the Outlaws all weekend.
And for 5 days, I slept over 16 hours a day. That first 2 days, I probably could have slept close to 20. Who knows? By that Friday, I was slightly worried. I knew that I wasn't depressed because I know what that feels like. I knew I wasn't sick. I know what that feels like. And that Friday morning, I was burning sick leave, and I got a call from a buddy of mine. His first thing he said to me was, how are you doing, country? And I said, not too good. And he said, what are you talking about? So we talked for an hour. I just walked around my pool outside, sweating my ass off, telling him everything that had happened. And he basically let me talk myself into, Scott, you need to call Safeguard.
Scott calls Safeguard's After Hours hotline. 2 weeks later, a psychologist and a counselor fly to see him for an in-person assessment.
And I get in there for the counselor talk. He sits me down, and I am ready for all these questions. I'm ready. I got answers for everything because I got this. I'm back. I'm fine. It was just a bump in the road. And he looks at me and he says, man, we've known each other for what, like 10 plus years? I was like, yeah. He said, let's do something different. He goes, I want to change. I want to change roles. I want you to pretend that you're me and I'm you. And we're here right now with everything that's happened. And I said, uh-huh. And he says, what would you tell me? And that threw me off. I looked at him and I was thinking in my head, you son of a bitch. And I leaned down, I looked down to the ground, I took a deep breath and I said, I would tell you that you need to take a break and that you should have taken one a long time ago.
Safeguard ends up issuing Scott a DNR, which stands for Do Not Recommend. It's like the FBI's version of a timeout. It means he can't work as a case agent or go undercover for at least 6 months. With the DNR, Scott was technically only allowed to teach and role play at the undercover school. One day, he's in the middle of a lesson about how to manage stress as an undercover agent when a supervisor drops by with a special guest.
And he comes walking in with Joe Pistone. Joe walks right up and sits directly to my right, staring at me. And I'm like, I said, well, class, speaking of undercover stressors, why don't y'all say hello to Mr. Joe Pistone, a.k.a. Donnie Brasco?
The Joe Pistone, the FBI agent whose story was turned into a Hollywood blockbuster. He listens as Scott talks to the class about his experience of being strip searched in the basement.
You know, I'm sitting here getting butterflies teaching it because I'm talking about something that's still pretty fresh. And
once the lesson's over, people start forming a line to shake Scott's hand.
Pistone's in line, and I remember thinking, why is he in line? And then he comes up, and when he gets to me, he gives me a little kiss on the cheek, the Italian mafia slap, you know? And he's like, I'm glad you're okay, kid. And then he walks off, and I'm just like, I don't want to say that's what I was striving for, because that's not what you want to strive for, but
we must have been like, did that just happen?
Yeah, it was pretty, for me, it was pretty freaking awesome. Not that I went through all that stuff, it's just that, you know, I was Joe Pistone.
That cheek slap from Donnie Brasco is a nice distraction, because the day he was teaching that lesson was the day Operation Roadkill would come to an end. When Scott got the DNR, he couldn't just drop everything and walk away without jeopardizing the case. The Outlaws would become suspicious. So he was allowed to keep in touch with the targets by phone.
He didn't drop out of the investigation. He didn't. He stayed in the investigation, but he was a puppeteer. He was doing his deals from whatever state he was in, and we were able to finish the case.
And if any of the Outlaws asked why he wasn't coming around anymore, he had an explanation.
They knew that I'd gotten married, and they knew that I had kids with this woman, or at least that's what the story was. And I told him, I said, look, I'm getting a divorce. Her family's in El Paso, which is like way the other way. And I said, I wouldn't be able to look at myself in the mirror in the morning if I don't get her and my kids set up. I said, but as soon as that shit's done, I'm fucking coming up to Massachusetts. I'm sick of this hot fucking place. So we did it that way.
He had been embedded with the Outlaws for almost 2 years. He had been in their homes, met their families, shared meals together, bounced their kids on his lap. Parts of his identity as Tex or Scott Calloway may have been fake, but some of the connections he'd made were far from it. The night of the takedown, as SWAT teams carry out the arrests, Scott's undercover phone suddenly rings.
And it's Scotttown, and here's the closest guy. This is the closest friendship that I've made over this 2 years in that targeted group. And he's all raspy voice. He's like, hey, Tex. He's like, I don't know what happened. He goes, I just got a call that your truck drivers, they got locked up. He goes, I don't know what's going on. And I said, I don't know anything about it. He goes, well, okay, I'm going to get up. I'm going to get cleaned up. I'm going to find out what the fuck's going on, and I'm going to call you back and let you know. And I said, okay, man. Our last words together was, he chirps and he says, I love you, brother. And I chirped back and I said, I love you too. And then I hung up the phone.
Less than an hour later, Scotttown was in handcuffs.
A notorious Massachusetts motorcycle gang busted on a variety of crimes tonight, including drugs, gun, and fraud charges.
15 people in all are behind bars after federal agents raided the Outlaw Motorcycle Club on School Street in Taunton. And an undercover officer was the key to busting this case.
Hundreds of officers seized weapons, cash, and drugs and arrested all the targets in one coordinated sweep.
Well, that was it. That was the end of the Outlaw case.
How'd that make you feel?
I've talked about it so much now that, and time has passed. But, I mean, that was it's nostalgic, euphoric. I don't know, pick one. It's, that was the longest, at that point, longest deep undercover I'd done. It's probably the closest bonds I'd ever made.
In the end, Operation Roadkill took down 15 Outlaw members and associates. They all pleaded out. Joe Dogs and Clothesline got 12 and a half years. Scotty T got 7. Scott never saw any of them again. But it wouldn't be long before he was back on another case. Next time on Agent Palehorse.
I said, oh, so we're going to have a cross burning? And he's like, now, Scott, it's not a cross burning. That'd be sacrilegious. It's a cross lighting.
FBI! Don't move! Get on the car!
Be cool, be cool.
This series was written and produced by me, Michelle Shephard, senior producer Ashley Mack, and producer Eunice Kim. Mixing and sound design by Evan Kelly. Emily Cannell is our digital producer. Our intern was Rachel DeGasperis. Special thanks to Andrew Friesen, the CBC Reference Library, and Oralation Studios. Chris Oak and Cecil Fernandez are our executive producers. Tanya Springer is the senior manager, and Arif Noorani is the director of CBC Podcasts. This series was produced alongside a book I wrote with Scott, codename Palehorse, How I Went Undercover to Expose America's Nazis. You can catch up with Season 1 of White Hot Hate wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're enjoying this series and want to help new listeners discover the show, please take some time to give us a rating and review on whichever is your chosen app. It really helps.